So guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, have you ever wondered if there is a limit to what exercise can do for you physically? I mean, we know that exercise makes us healthier, but is there a point that exercise will make you less healthy? Well, there could be, and that's what we're talking about today. Now, I came across an article in Outside Online written by Alex Hutchinson, so you know it's good. And the article is titled, 2 Promising Updates on Heart Health in Endurance Athletes. So judging by the title, we know that the end result of this video is going to be pretty promising, but if you wanted to pick and choose your data, you could always find something less positive, because those studies are out there. Oh, and this is the weekly running and training vlog where the main purpose of this video is for you to tell me about your week of running. I want to hear about your successes, and I definitely want to hear about those setbacks. Go ahead and drop a comment about your week of running. Okay, so the setup is that you run a little bit, you get a little healthier. Maybe you run or you exercise a bit more, you get even more healthy, but then you run even more. You exercise for longer, past the recommended amount. And the recommended amount is still 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of intense exercise, and running always counts as intense exercise. So technically speaking, if you are running more than 75 minutes a week, you are doing more than is recommended. And it could be detrimental if you pay attention to some of these studies. Okay, so we all know that plaque in our arteries is probably not a good thing, right? We want a good flow through our arteries. Good arterial flow is conducive to good health and life. But there was a study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that explored the link between exercise and atherosclerosis. Now, the way that you tell if you have a calcium buildup in your arteries is by getting a CT scan to measure your coronary artery calcium score, your CAC score. Now, here's the thing. We want a low CAC score. Higher CAC scores reliably predict an elevated risk of possibly fatal heart problems when we're looking at the general population. Now, I know, you and I, we're not the general population, but here's the thing. Endurance athletes tend to have higher CAC scores when compared against other athletes that don't run as much. Now, I said, here's the thing, like that is the sensational part. The actual sensational part, so here's the thing, that increased calcium level in the endurance athlete's arteries is actually a different kind of plaque. So endurance athletes do have higher levels of arterial calcium deposits, but in endurance athletes, the plaques that line our arteries are hard, they're smooth, and they're very unlikely to rupture. And rupturing is where the issues happen, and they start flowing through your arteries, and then they create a blockage, and then you're in all sorts of trouble. Now, you might be wondering, well, I don't want increased plaque in my arteries. It seriously cannot be a good thing, and I'd probably agree with you. But there was a study in China that had 2,500 participants, and they separated them into 3 groups. A group that did less than the recommended amount of exercise, a group that did the recommended amount of exercise, and then a group that did more than the recommended amount of exercise. And that study found that the participants that did more than the recommended amount of exercise were indeed more likely to develop the plaques in their arteries. However, they were not more likely to experience adverse cardiac events at the conclusion of the study. So even though excessive exercise does contribute to the formation of arterial plaques, the plaques are different than that of the general population that doesn't exercise. So this may or may not come as a surprise. I mean, we know we're different than the general population, but in this case, the arterial plaques are not as bad for us as they are for people that just sit on the sofa. However, there were a couple other studies. There was one from the Cooper Clinic in Texas and another one from Copenhagen, and they interpreted their studies as showing a reverse J-curve. So that reverse J-curve goes something like this. As you exercise more, your health gets better and better and better, but then you exercise so much that it starts to turn back down and your health starts getting worse. Now, there are some methodological flaws in those studies, but if you are looking for something negative to take from this video, you can take that. There is a limit, the amount of exercise that you can do, where the benefits of that exercise start to decline a little bit. But I want to tell you about another study that was a little more robust in its methodology, and it was published in Circulation. And this is a longitudinal study that started in the 80s, and it follows over 116,000 adults. And over the course of the 30 years that this study was being conducted, there were 47,000 deaths. Now, this is important. 47,000 deaths sounds like a lot, but the idea of these 47,000 deaths is that it's given us a lot of data. We've got a lot of people to look at to see how they died. Now, remember I mentioned the Copenhagen study a minute ago? The conclusion that there was a reverse J-curve. When we get to too much exercise, the actual benefits start going down. That was based on 2 deaths. So you kind of have to take it with a pinch of salt. Obviously, when we have a higher N, we can take the results and we can interpret them with a little more confidence. Now, one more thing about this new study is that the study participants were asked about their exercise habits every 2 years, rather than just asking them about it at the beginning of their study. So a lot can change over the course of a long-term study. Some people stop exercising, some people exercise more. So in the new study, when they interviewed the participants every 2 years, the researchers were able to divide the participants into groups based on their average exercise level over the course of the study. This is huge. We're getting a much more reliable data set this way. And the study found that those doing between 150 and 300 minutes of intense exercise, so running, a week, were about half as likely to die during the course of of the study. This is a big deal. And of course that 150 to 300 minutes of vigorous exercise translates roughly into about 300 to 600 minutes of moderate exercise. So going out for a walk. Now here's the thing, even when the researchers adjusted the results for the secondary benefits of exercise, such as a lower body mass index, the participants that did between 150 and 300 minutes of vigorous exercise a week were still 25% less likely to die. Again, this is huge. But here's the thing, this is what we're going to have to look at in the future, is that 300 minutes of vigorous exercise is only 5 hours of running a week. I know a lot of you out there, me included, does more than 5 hours of running per week. So can we still take the results of this study and kind of push them out for our own amount of exercise? I don't know. Well, actually, we do know. It turns out that those doing more than 5 hours of vigorous exercise a week, results didn't continue to get better, although they didn't get any worse. They just stayed about the same when you do more. But I'll take it. Running and exercise gives me a lot more than just being able to live longer. It makes the years that I actually am alive a lot more enjoyable. So not only do we get to live longer, we get to enjoy those years a little more. Here's the interesting thing though. Remember how I said that the participants, they were interviewed every 2 years to find out their amount of exercise that they were doing? Well, it turns out that when the scientists reran the numbers using only the first interview of the participants, where they said how much exercise they did at the beginning of the study, when they used those numbers and just extrapolated it out, the reverse J-curve appears. So it does turn out that the studies that have showed the reverse J-curve are not entirely reliable. So if you choose to believe the negative studies, just take it with a pinch of salt. The best part is about taking the negative view of the reverse J-curve is that if you do exercise a lot, what you think is going to happen, you dying, probably isn't going to happen. Anyway, I had a pretty good week of running. I was still away for most of last week. So again, if you want to check out my week of running, go ahead and look on Strava. The link to my Strava is in the show notes below. But where I was, the upload speeds of the Wi-Fi was just not good enough to be sure I would be able to upload this video on time. So I decided to scrap the bit where I just tell you about my week of running, which is probably for a good thing. There was a lot of treadmill miles. All right guys, thanks for staying all the way to the end of this video. Hey, if you have stayed this long, why don't you go ahead and give me the thumbs up emoji, just to let me know that you've been here the whole time. And don't forget to let me know about your week of running. Remember, successes and setbacks. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.